Welcome to Questions of Life. I'm Cath, I'm here with Donald.
Hello.
And this evening we are looking at the subject of, is God fair? Now, Donald, we're getting towards Christmas. And I don't know whether you love Christmas. Do you like Christmas?
I do.
You do? You're a bit
On the whole. Once I've got there.
Once you've got there, because it's quite busy for you as a minister with loads of services. But you do quite actually like Christmas?
Yeah.
Okay, I love Christmas. So I'm usually listening to Christmas music, October onwards, planning for all of our events and stuff. And when I was little, my favourite time of Christmas was Christmas Eve. We got to stay up late. We used to go to the late night service at church. And me and my brother would come back. He's a couple of years older. We'd come back and we'd put stockings at the end of our beds. And we would just be so excited. It was the kind of anticipation as to what was going to happen at Christmas. So we'd go to sleep thinking, when we wake up, the stockings will be full at the end of our beds. And we'd wake up at some stupid hour, early morning, and we'd get to our stockings, and they wouldn't be filled with lots, but to us, it was amazing. So you'd have these little presents. There'd be a satsuma. I have no idea why there was a satsuma. I don't like satsumas. It's just a complete waste of time. There were some walnuts, but there were some nice little stocking gifts, and it was fantastic. And every year, I look forward to that. That was one of my favourite parts of Christmas. And we got to an age when my parents decided, a few years ago, that it wasn't appropriate to give their grown-up children Christmas stockings. And so they said, this year, we're stopping it. We're not going to do it anymore. And I'm like, what? I'm sorry? You're not doing it anymore. I said, that's not fair. They're like, why is it not fair? Because I'm 2 years younger than Richard, and he's had stockings for 2 years more than me. That's not fair. I should keep on having them for 2 more years. And this was my argument. And you can tell that it still sits with me. I may need a bit of counselling. But to me, they said, no, that's it. And I'm like, that's not fair. And there are so many different situations in life where you look at other people, you look at what's happening, and you think, that's just not fair. And sometimes I think we do that with God as well. I think sometimes we look through the Bible, we look at maybe how he spoke to some people, how he used some people, how he blessed some people in different ways, and we look at our lives and we think, God's not done that for me. Is there something wrong with me? That just doesn't seem fair. So my first question for you this evening is, does God treat everybody the same?
The short and the long answer is yes and no. It depends what area of life. My parents, everybody stopped having their stocking on their 18th, when the year they were 18.
That's fair.
Except that when you are 21 and you see your younger sibling having a stocking, you don't think that's fair because they're getting one and you're not.
No, but it is fair. That makes sense, Mum and Dad. Listen to that. I still need 2 stockings, just saying.
Yes, but somebody else is getting something at the same time that you're not.
But that's okay because you've had it.
Yeah, but that's the whole area of fairness, isn't it? It's trying it depends what angle you're looking at it from.
Yep.
And so I guess we're going to explore this tonight, but I think we have to say right from the outset that God does treat people differently, but there is a consistency and a fairness around the values and the way in which he treats us differently. So he consistently treats us differently, if that makes sense. And it all depends on whether we're looking at the whole area of suffering, whether we're looking at the whole area of our skills, whether we're looking at the whole area of punishment, or whether we're looking at the whole area of forgiveness. Mm-hmm. And the answer to that God deals with us in different ways. So I want to say that, yes, God is fair, but sometimes our perception of what fairness is different. Mm-hmm. But God is always just, but he is also generous and gracious, which also carries with it the sense of difference. Mm-hmm. So shall we try and unpack that?
Yep,
where shall we begin? I want to say right on the outset, and there are other Questions of Life videos that you can look at. I want to say at the outset that I don't believe that God brings suffering or hurt to somebody. We did that on 2 or 3 Questions of Life, so please go back and look at that. So when we ask, this tonight is not about why is this person suffering and that person isn't, because I don't think that's from God anyway. So, but that's a question for another evening, which we've already looked at. Maybe we'll come back to. So let's leave on one side for the moment the area of suffering, because I don't think that's God's intention or purpose that people suffer. So then we're looking at the area of punishment. And the Bible, I think, is very clear that there is a judgment at the end of life for the things that we've done that have been hurtful and damaging to other people, that have been hurtful or damaging to ourselves, that have broken the 10 Commandments, which are all the instructions on how to love. And that punishment is consistent and it is equitable. That punishment is destruction.
Yep.
So God treats everybody fairly in saying, if you don't live the way I wanted you to live, then you face judgment. But then we talk about forgiveness, and that's where it becomes a little more complex, because the way what we've talked about again in previous questions of life is that God forgives everyone who repents, everyone who says, God, I'm sorry, everyone who cries out in mercy. Now, that may be at the beginning of our life, and we then live a whole lifetime of being obedient to God and serving him. Or it may be as the thief on the cross, at the very end of our life. You may live a long life as a Christian and serve God for many, many years. I might come to faith at the end of my life. When we get to heaven, we're both forgiven. You may say, that's not fair. Should I not have more reward than me, who lived perhaps as a Christian for less time than you? That's where we discover that grace is gloriously unequal or equal. The equality is that God forgives everyone who repents.
Yeah.
And that's it. And that is gloriously equal. A person who has lived a good life for 50 years may look at a person who's lived a good life for 5 minutes and say that's not fair. But I would say that there are plenty of other benefits from living a good life for 50 years that compensate. Yep. For example, in heaven you have a sense of fulfillment, a sense of achievement, a sense of my life has meant something and done something. You can get and look around in heaven and see the fruit of your life. I come to Christ in the last 5 minutes of my life. There's nothing much in heaven that I've created or invested. So there is a difference, but fundamentally God forgives people because he forgives people. And in the New Testament, the religious people thought that was unfair. It was very clear they thought that was unfair. They thought that they who had been good should be treated better than people who came late to the party. Yep. And Jesus is shocking in saying grace is indiscriminate. Grace is available to all. Forgiveness is available to all. So in that sense, God treats everybody the same, that some people might feel looks a bit unfair.
So talk us through then the parable, the story that Jesus told in Matthew 20. Yeah,
so in Matthew 20, Jesus tells a story about a guy who goes to hire some workers, and he sets out at the beginning of the day, and he hires some workers, and he says the salary, the fee for a day's work in my vineyard is this figure. And they say, oh, yeah, that's a good price, that's fair enough, we'll take that.
So they're happy at that point.
They're happy at
Great
that because
deal.
it seems a good deal.
Yep.
And then they're not getting all the work done. So at lunchtime, he goes out and finds some more people. And then late afternoon, there's still some more work that needs to be done. So he goes and finds some more people. So there are 3 groups of people. There's people who worked all day, there's people who worked half a day, and there's people who worked maybe a quarter of the day. When they come to be paid at the end of the day, the owner of the vineyard, who is symbolizing God, pays them all the same. And the people who started all at the beginning of the day say, that's not fair. How can you do that? And Jesus makes the point that if the owner chooses to be generous, that's his choice. The fee at the beginning of the day was good enough for those people. Yep. And this is the problem when we start to look at what other people have. So very often in life, we can be completely satisfied with what we have until we see what somebody else has. I think there's a great line in the James song, Sit Down, where he says, I could live without riches if I hadn't seen other people. So I've got that wrong, but it's this idea that I'm quite happy with who I am until I see what other people have. Forgiveness, if I told you that if you say to God, you are forgiven, you say to God, I'm sorry for my sin, and he says, then come and spend eternity with me in heaven, we would all say that's a great deal.
Yep.
And that's the bottom line. The fact that he says that to the worst sinner and the least worst sinners, and the same thing, that's the nature of God's love, that he's just overwhelming, it's abundant. Mm-hmm. So that's what that parable is about. And it really disturbed the early, because they had an idea that God would reward good people more than he rewards bad people. Now, I love the idea that God doesn't. I love the idea, because I would count myself in the bad people category. And to find that God is overwhelming in his generosity and his grace is fantastic. We may say, well, what's the point of being good? And that's where we go back to what I was saying earlier. The point of being good is actually it's more fulfilling, and there's more sense of you've achieved something with your life. And I would far rather give my life to God than have wasted it. Because we've only got this life once. We've only got one chance to live it. So I'd rather live it. So I don't think you lose out. But I'm just glad that God's grace, that I'm glad that heaven isn't segregated with good and bad people.
I think what we gain is incredible. So I think when you look at it in isolation, when you look at it, my life, that moment of becoming a Christian, that change, that sense of I'm loved, I'm known, I'm accepted, I'm forgiven. I don't go through this lifetime on my own, but I go through it with God by my side, who's able to speak into my life and to encourage me. And I have the promise and the hope of heaven. And those things are incredible. And when you just look at yourself and you look at what we've been given and what's on offer to all of us, it is incredible. But it is when we start judging. It is when we start looking at other people. And I know that there are some people that would say, this always comes up when we have our alpha sessions. People will say, that's great, God's a God of forgiveness and he forgives everyone, but I just don't think it's fair for people like Hitler. Suppose Hitler, in the moment that he committed suicide, turned to God. Well, that's not fair, because he's lived a whole life doing bad things. He's a bad person. And we kind of have these degrees of how good and how bad a person is, and that God shouldn't treat them the same as he treats me. But you just called yourself a sinner. We all are. And there's a sense of beginning to understand that we're all saved by grace, that not one of us is worthy in our own strength, with our own deeds, of being good enough, pure enough, holy enough to be accepted by God. And so for me, I would hope, and this is my attitude, there's a sense of delight and joy anytime someone becomes a Christian.
Yeah.
Whether they're 15, whether they're 105, whether they've not considered Christianity until their deathbed, I rejoice that in that one moment there is this connection, and that's my prayer. My prayer is to never give up on people, to always keep on praying, and to rejoice that God is a God who doesn't say, right, you've made it to this point in your life, you've had nothing to do with me, get on with it. I love the fact that he welcomes.
Absolutely. And the challenge, I would say, if I can be blunt, is that for those of us, the times when we're tempted to feel it's not fair, I don't think there's a danger that we haven't really grasped grace, and that we subconsciously think we have earned God's love.
Yes.
And if God's love is to be earned, then yes, I can complain that other people haven't worked as hard to be loved by God as I have. But the deal is that I can't earn God's love. He loves me overwhelmingly and I don't need to earn it. Now, I am much more reassured that I don't need to earn it.
Yeah.
So when I stray into resenting grace, it's probably because I haven't really grasped it for myself. I haven't really got hold of that I am unconditionally loved. And if I'm unconditionally loved, I can't put a condition on somebody else.
Yeah.
And when I'm putting conditions on other people, I'm probably not fully in the love of God myself. I haven't fully grasped it, understood it. That God is saying there is nothing more you can do to be loved by me. There is no action that makes you more lovable. You are infinitely loved. What I require for salvation is the attitude of sorry.
Yeah.
And you go back to your Hitler. We don't know what Hitler's thing, but his outcome would be. That's where God's the judge. But it would only have come if he was genuinely sorry.
Yeah, you can't blag God on your deathbed. You can't hedge your bets. And,
no. It's not just a form of words. It's a heart attitude.
Yes. Okay, so talking about the fairness of God, God is fair in the way that he welcomes and forgives everybody, whether you're 5, 55, or 105. You know, God is a God of love. He loves us and he delights when we come to him. And it doesn't matter whether it's on our deathbed or whether we are 5 years old. So he does treat us differently in that. Now, many of us find that quite easy and straightforward to get our heads around. You think, yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, God loves people. Can't wait for them to come to know him. Is just delighted that they have responded. That's great. I think some of the problems that we have in the Is God Fair is in the more personal stuff to do with our lives. And again, we look at our lives and we have a little sneaky look and we look at other people and we think, oh, God's blessed them with that, or they've got that, or this. So talk a little bit more about, you know, does God treat everybody the same? Not necessarily in a forgiveness, salvation thing, but in different areas of our lives.
So I think God loves diversity. He loves difference. And I think sometimes we put a human scale onto that God doesn't particularly recognize, to do perhaps with beauty, or that we consider some things more beautiful and attractive than other things, or to do with a hierarchy of talents, that some skill is more worthy or to be appraised than another skill. And I don't think God actually understands or accepts or believes in any of that. So we all look different. And we may look at somebody else and say, I wish I had their hair, or I wish I had their skin tone, or I wish I had their blue eyes, or I wish I had their perfectly shaped nose, or I wish I had their long legs, or I wish I had... Because somewhere along the line, the world has corrupted our perception of what beauty is, and we've decided this is beautiful and this isn't. And that somewhere along the line, somebody's told us that we're not good enough, and that our nose is too big, or that baldness doesn't look good. I happen to think baldness is great. I mean, I'm happy to be bald or going bald. So one of the things that I feel that God does in a person's life is when we begin to discover how loved we are by him, we become less concerned about our appearance and less concerned in comparing ourselves to the perfect person. And we become more secure in our sense of identity, that we're loved, not because of how we look. The problem with our world is we create a sense of value on how we look, which is problematic because most people peak around the age of 18 to 23, 24, and from then on we are decaying.
My life.
So I think comparing ourselves with somebody is a really unhelpful thing. And that second big area is all to do with skills and abilities, that we look at somebody and say, well, they can sing and I can't, or they can, they're good at art, or they've got a degree and I've got a couple of O-levels, GCSEs, and we compare ourselves. And again, I don't think God buys into that, because I think diversity makes a really beautiful community. And the spectrum of abilities, the spectrum of different skills. One of the models in the Bible, which relates particularly to the church, but I think it applies in this area, is likening us to all to being a different part of the body, that we may be an eye or an ear or a nose or a mouth or a fingernail or a belly button or a toenail or whatever it is, that we are made different, but it's the collective. And each part of the body is valuable. And it's in Corinthians, and God, Paul talks about, an eye can't say to an ear, I don't need you, or I wish I was like you, or anything like that. And again, I think coming to terms with accepting what God has given us in terms of our skills and our abilities, and being confident that that is good, and that there's a part for me to play in the kingdom of God, in the body of Christ. There is a jigsaw-shaped hole that only I can fill. Whatever my intellect is, whatever my skills are, that actually God has shaped that for the purposes he's intended for my life. I find that liberating. And one of the things that's most helpful to me is being completely comfortable and honest about what I can't do, what I'm no good at. What I joke about it a lot, but there are lots of things I know I can't do. I can't sing. I'm not musical. I can't paint. I'm quite shy. I'm not great at conversation. I'm hopeless at small talk. I'm not very good at going into a situation cold and meeting people. I'm not very good at making people feel at home. I'm not very good at creating a fun atmosphere in a room. All of those things I'm not very good at. I happen to be okay at speaking and explaining things. I happen to be okay at strategic thinking and making decisions. I'm not the most, I'm not the best, I'm okay. But actually it's liberating to say, I need a team of other people around me. So rather than be envious of people who sing better than me, who play musical instruments better than me, who organise things better than me, who welcome better than me, who can tell jokes better than me, rather than being envious of them, I rejoice in them because when I'm in their company, I actually relax and think, thank goodness I don't have to be like that. They're there to be like that. And that for me has been really liberating, in saying that God has deliberately shaped me to be different. And if I just concentrate on what I haven't got and what I'm not, I'm impoverished. And actually everybody else is, because then I'm not offering what I've got. And the same with gratitude. And I remember I've done a thing 2 or 3 times over the years. I remember doing it one time with young people where I asked them what it is that they really wanted. So I had a group of about 50 kids, and I said, tell me what you really want. I used to do it in schools a bit, but I remember, and the kid would say, I want I don't know, let's say I want a PlayStation. And I would say, hands up who's got a PlayStation. Another kid would put their hand up and say, are you completely happy you've got everything you want? And they say, no. I said, what is it you really want? And they would say, I don't know. They would say, I want a bike. And you say, hands up who's got a bike. Okay, the kid's got a bike. And eventually, without fail, I would end up back to the first kid. So they would be holding their hand up for something that they've got. And you just say to everybody, look, everybody's got something to be grateful for, and everybody has things they don't have. If you focus on what you don't have, you're unhappy. If you're able to look and say, I've got this, and other people would like a PlayStation, or other people would like a bike, or other people would like roller skates, or whatever it is, actually you can be grateful for who you are. And actually, those of you got a PlayStation, invite the others around your house to play with the PlayStation. Now you've got a bike, go out and share it. And that's the way God intended it. Yeah. That we have different blessings, and if we hold on to them, we're impoverished. But we create to share. So he treats us differently. He gives us different blessings, different skills, different bodies, different shapes, different all kinds of things. And that creates a much better community.
Amy Evans has messaged in. She looked up the song, You Were Right, Sit Down by James. And the line says, if I hadn't seen such riches, I could live with being poor.
That's it. If I hadn't seen such riches,
But
I
it's
could live with
that
being poor.
sentiment, isn't it? That if we focus on what's good in our lives,